Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we'll be discussing the 1942 Rakhine Massacre and the ethnic cleansing that took place during that time. In May 1942, Rakhine people were subjected to brutal massacres and ethnic cleansing during Bengali Rakhine riots in present-day Rakhine State, Myanmar. Sparked by violence involving British Indian soldiers and Bengali civilians, the conflict led to the destruction of over 200 Rakhine villages, mass killings, and forced displacement. Despite mediation efforts, thousands perished, and survivors were driven to refugee camps, profoundly impacting Rakhine communities. Before we dive into the tragic events, let's understand how the 1942 Bengali-Rakhine conflict began. To start our exploration of Rakhine history, let's set the stage for the events of May 13, 1942. Dr. Min, what were the underlying causes that led to the onset of the Bengali-Rakhine riots in Sittwe that year?
Certainly. The roots of the conflict intertwine with British colonial administration. British forces, particularly Indian soldiers, were stationed in Rakhine, and reports indicate these soldiers, sometimes collaborating with Bengali civilians, committed abuses against the Rakhine. This included violence and even rape, creating deep resentment and unbearable conditions for the local Rakhine population.
That's a striking example of how colonial governance could inflame local tensions. How did these initial incidents escalate into widespread violence across the region?
The unrest in Sittwe rapidly spread to other townships, Maungdaw, Minbra, Mrauk-u, and Kyauktaw. Although Rakhine leaders like U Pinyathiha and U Tha Kyaw attempted to mediate and calm the situation, the fabric of trust was already torn. Some Bengali leaders and refugees, feeling threatened, began organizing for self-defense. But this quickly escalated into coordinated attacks on Rakhine villages.
So, would you say that a blend of colonial mismanagement and local fears about survival fueled cycles of retaliation?
Absolutely. It's a classic case of a power vacuum. Colonial officers failing to protect civilians, which emboldened both sides to take matters into their own hands. Tragically, this set the stage for ethnic cleansing and mass atrocities.
Thanks so much, Mr. Min. Sadly, the story doesn't end there. Next, we'll look at how the situation escalated into brutal violence and massacres, especially in Maungdaw and neighboring regions. Transitioning from initial unrest, let's delve into how the violence intensified, particularly in Maungdaw. What do historical accounts reveal about the scale and nature of these attacks?
Evidence shows that by May 1942, all Bengali villages in Maungdaw Township mobilized. Over 20,000 Bengalis, many armed with machetes and crude weapons, surrounded Rakhine villages, cutting off roads and bridges. This siege strategy isolated entire communities, making escape nearly impossible.
That scale is staggering. Are there examples or survivor testimonies that illustrate what families experienced during these attacks?
Indeed. Imagine a household trying to flee before dawn, only to be ambushed, losing all possessions and returning wounded. Thousands sought refuge in monasteries, like the Mahakyan Phu compound, which became overcrowded, echoing with the cries of terrified children. Many attempted to cross the Naf River, but with limited boats and heavy monsoon rains, escape was perilous.
It's reminiscent of other historical sieges where civilians are trapped and infrastructure collapses. Did any authorities attempt interventions at this stage?
Efforts were made. Session Judge U Tha Kyaw coordinated with British officers and Nepalese Gurkhas to escort refugees. However, logistical challenges and ongoing attacks meant only a fraction could be ferried to safety. By nightfall, those across the river witnessed Maungdaw ablaze, a haunting symbol of the destruction left behind.
That was very insightful, Mr. Min. Thank you. Now, we'd like to shift our attention to the third session titled Systematic Erasure, Destruction of Villages and Communities. Dr. Min, how widespread was the devastation and what methods were used in this systematic erasure?
The scale was unprecedented. Nearly 100 named Rakhine and minority villages were razed, with detailed household counts lost to history. Attackers looted homes, seized food stores, and then torched entire settlements, sometimes not sparing even livestock. In Town Phun Pin, for example, over 500 people, including monks, were burned alive after seeking sanctuary in a monastery.
That's horrifying and tragically similar to events like the burning of Litis in World War II Europe. What happened to survivors and those who managed to escape?
Many survivors fled by boat to Bangladesh or over the Mayu Mountains, only to face further violence. Some reached refugee camps in Dinajpur, India. But for those unable to escape, entire communities, elders, adults, children, were wiped out. Post-war, most villages were never rebuilt, and the loss of farmland and homes permanently destabilized the region.
Were there any attempts to document or memorialize these communities, or did international observers respond at all?
International response was minimal, with most global historians neglecting these events. Today, only traces remain, charred fields and oral histories. The trauma persists, shaping Rakhine identity and memory.
Now, let's move on to the final part of our session, which focuses on the long-term impact and lessons from modern ethnic conflict. As we bring our discussion to the present, how did the 1942 events shape the long-term trajectory of the Rakhine people and the dynamics of ethnic conflict in the region?
The 1942 massacres left deep scars, demographically, economically, and psychologically. Many Rakhine communities never recovered, and survivors' stories fostered generational trauma and mistrust. Studies on ethnic violence, like those by Dr. Fearon at Stanford, show such events often entrench divisions and perpetuate cycles of fear.
Do you see parallels between these historical events and more recent ethnic conflicts in Myanmar or elsewhere?
Absolutely. The mechanisms, breakdown of authority, use of siege tactics, targeting of civilians mirror later crises from Rwanda to Bosnia. It underscores the importance of early intervention, minority rights protections, and robust international response to prevent history from repeating itself.
If you could suggest one major lesson for policymakers or peace builders today, what would it be?
The main takeaway is that ignoring early warning signs and failing to address grievances can have catastrophic consequences. Proactive mediation, inclusive governance, and transparent documentation are essential. The tragedy of 1942 should remind us all that silence and denial only fuel future violence. And there is also some accusation that the British Army was the one arming the Muslims to counterattack the advancing Japanese troops and Burmese nationalists, but they turned their guns against the Rakhine people. I hope it will be explored in the future podcast.
Thank you, Mr. Men, for your full explanation. We hope today's discussion has provided our listeners with a deeper understanding of the 1942 Rakhine Massacre and the broader issue of ethnic cleansing. Thank you to our audience for joining us. Stay tuned for the next episode.
The above podcast was created by Arakan Bay News, ABN, using references from articles by Arakanese politicians and historians, testimonies of survivors or family members of Rakhine villagers, and oral histories of atrocities passed down through generations.